Hey everybody, excited to continue our study in Joshua. We'll be in chapter 7 this week in our Bible fellowship groups, and this is a difficult conversation to have. There is sin here, there is punishment, but it's a very important conversation for us to have, and an important opportunity for all of us to evaluate our lives and just to talk about the sin in our lives, but also God's grace in the midst of it. So in chapter 7, we are coming out of last week and the defeat of Jericho, and God was very clear that everything was to be destroyed, nothing was going to be kept, and the only things that were going to be kept were for the Lord's treasury. And so there was a very, very specific instruction that everything needs to go and everything needs to be destroyed and nothing is to be kept. So we get to chapter 7, and but the part that happens before our lesson is about this defeat at Ai and or I, and it should be a very easy military victory coming out of Jericho. Joshua sends some spies. Joshua sends some troops. Should not be a big deal, but Israel unexpectedly encounters a pretty humiliating defeat in this military battle. And so Joshua is confused and perplexed, and he is crying out to God, trying to figure out what had happened. And when we get to chapter 7, we see that there was a secret sin in the camp that Joshua was unaware of. And we see that Achan, during the defeat of Jericho, had taken some of the things that he was not supposed to take and buried it. And obviously, the key lesson to be learned here is there are no secret sins. God is all knowing, God is all powerful, God knows everything about us. And so the thought that we can have secret sins is just a silly idea. Um, but a couple things I just want to kind of talk through. Um, it's interesting, after this defeat, at the first part of chapter 7, Israel has now lost heart. And we see that that was the state of the land when Israel came to Jericho. That's what Rahab said. All of these people have lost heart against you because of what they have heard your God do. And now it's Israel, because of this sin and this defeat, has now lost heart. We see God threatening to remove his presence from Joshua, which is a massive deal. We've seen God um, tell Joshua that he will be with him over and over and over, as he did with Moses. Um, and without God's presence, we see this in verse 12. If God's presence were to leave, they would continue to see this type of failure and defeat. Um, they would be fleeing from their enemies, like just happened, rather than their enemies fleeing from them because of the presence of God with them. So Achan has this sin. He obviously has a chance to come clean. He has chances to confess this, and he doesn't. And the thing that just kind of struck out to me big time with this is how aware we all should be and how easy it is for sin to creep into our lives. Because Israel just experienced Jericho. They know who this God is. Achan knows Yahweh. He knows how good he is. He knows how he provides for them. And yet, despite just seeing all of this happen and this miraculous victory at Jericho, despite seeing this, Achan follows through with this sin. And I think it's just so important for us to see how easy it is to fall into temptation. Even at times when we see God moving, even at times when we see God doing a work in our life or in our church or in our groups, it is so easy for us to fall into this temptation. And so we must always be alert. The sin here we see in verse 21 was he coveted something. And that's the root of so much of our sin, is there is something that we want that we're not supposed to have, but we want it, and so we go get it. And again, this story should just serve us all as a reminder that there are no secret sins, and God is all knowing, and that we should always be aware that even when things seem to be going really good for us, or we're in good spiritual states, or we see God moving, that does not mean that we cannot fall into temptation. So we must always be alert. And when we do fall, one big lesson that we can learn from here is we need to be quick to confess, and we need to be quick to seek forgiveness. And so, kind of a shorter video, kind of a simpler thought, but we really just need to drive home with ourselves and with our groups this week is that our sin always dishonors God, and it always has negative effects on people around us. And there is no secret sin, but one thing that is so true throughout the Bible, and one of the most glorious things about Scripture, is that God is always willing to hear us confess our sin. And Christ died on the cross so that we could confess our sin and receive forgiveness. And so I hope this is, despite the difficult lesson, I hope it's still an encouraging week. I encourage you to point them to Jesus. There may be a lot of guilt in the room, which is okay. There may be a lot of guilt about sin. There may be a lot of, well, we don't want guilt, but there may be a lot of shame in the room. There may be a lot of people challenging themselves, and there may be sin coming to their minds. And that's okay. That's what these stories are for. But these stories are for us to confess our sin and to be reminded of the importance of doing so. So make sure you get to the cross. Make sure you get to God's grace and mercy that is waiting for those who confess their sins. And I'll be praying for you this week. I pray that the gospel is still proclaimed. I pray that hearts are still changed, and that sin is defeated in our Bible fellowship groups this week. So love you guys. Praying for you. Don't ever hesitate to reach out if it's anything that you need.